Moving on, over the last week, a shocking display in Gaza as Hamas holds its end of days promise conference on how to run Palestine once they liberate it from Israel. Hundreds of thousands of Gaza residents working up a frenzy outside their Chamber of Commerce building in desperate hopes of getting a permit to work in Israel. The unemployment rate in the Strip is now reaching upwards of 65%, with the average daily wages in Gaza sitting at just $13 a day, as opposed to a minimum daily wage of $155 in Israel for unskilled laborers. Or to put it simply, a permit to work in Israel is akin to winning the lottery for the average Gazan. So, what does this mean for the true state of affairs between Israel and Gaza? Joining me to discuss, Head of Legal Strategies with Palestinian Media Watch, Lieutenant Colonel in the IDF Reserves, Maurice Hirsch. Thank you so much for being with us, Lieutenant Colonel.
Hi, good afternoon.
So what does this mean with respect to Gazan-Palestinian outlook towards living with Israel and Israelis?
So I think the permits and really the rush to receive the permits exposes a few different subjects which need to be discussed. Some of them simply strategic, and some of them really at the level of national policy of where are we going forward. So let's stay at the basic tactical level. The Palestinians obviously want to work in Israel. It doesn't matter how much they demonize Israel. It doesn't matter how much they say they hate Israel. The truth of the matter is, every one of the Palestinians in Gaza would prefer to work in Israel, where they get paid social security, they get insurance coverage, they get a decent wage at the end of the day, they get holiday payment. Really, in general, the conditions of Palestinian workers in Israel are far, far superior in their entirety, not only the actual wages, to those of the conditions of the workers in the Palestinian Authority in general, and in Gaza probably specifically. As regards really the next tactical step is, well, who are the people who are going to receive these work permits? What we've seen in the past is that the people who receive the work permits are those who are closely connected to Hamas. In many instances where the number of permits are limited, those who receive the permits are people who are specifically chosen and authorized by Hamas. It's not coincidental that some of those people are then involved in terrorist activity, whether it be funding Hamas via ostensibly legitimate commerce. That's how Hamas brings its money in. Hamas in Turkey, Salah Haruri buys a container, sends it to a legitimate businessman via Israel. The businessman comes into Israel, does his business. Hamas takes the merchandise at the end, and there you have terror funding for Hamas.
Security issues, of course, are a serious concern that needs to be discussed. But many analysts are saying that this situation could be leveraged by Israel to undermine Hamas and, more importantly, Hamas terrorists. Can you speak to that strategy?
Well, I don't think there's really much chance of undermining the Hamas terrorists in this idea. Hamas holds the Gaza Strip with a stranglehold. It has done since 2006, when they were legitimately elected, and then since 2007, when they threw out the Fatah leaders who had really usurped their authority. I don't think there is anything that Israel could do in order to change that course of history. As you started and you opened, they're holding conferences on the end of days when Hamas wipes out Israel and kills the people that they want to kill, and imprisons the Jews, the intellectuals who they think will still help them. That's their mindset. They're not in the mindset of let's make peace. They're not in the mindset of, well, let's feed the starving Gazans, let's give them employment. And those that leave aren't the Gazans that object to and would fight against the Hamas leadership. It's those that are chosen and specifically given the opportunity by the Hamas leadership. Really what this does is give the Hamas leadership the chance to, instead of Israel promoting some type of peace initiative, it gives the Gazans and the Hamas leadership there more control over the people who are getting out. We're the ones who hand out these incredible sweets, and therefore we are the ones who are responsible and should take credit for it. That's a whole different story.
So how far is Gaza, I should ask, from a complete economic collapse? Because as I mentioned before, the unemployment rate is upwards of 65%. Among Gazans with education, with degrees, that unemployment rate is actually much higher. And what would happen along the Israeli border should an economic collapse in Gaza occur?
But I think people have been talking about an economic collapse in Gaza for many years. Probably, I don't know if you remember, in 2000, I think in 2013, the UN published a report saying that by 2020, Gaza will be unlivable. Well, that's just not true. There is a reality of very high unemployment. There is a reality of poverty there, which is partly being supported and alleviated by the money that's been flowing in from Qatar and the money that's been flowing in from the Palestinian Authority. But really, when you ask who's responsible for the situation, it's really Hamas. And it isn't something which Israel should really take responsibility for. This is part of the larger strategic problem. In 2005, Israel pulled every single Jewish resident out of the Gaza Strip, removed every last one of the soldiers. For 15 years, 16 years, the Gaza Strip has been independent and could have developed itself in size and capacity and desire into the Singapore of the Middle East. But Gaza has chosen the path of Hamas. Gazans have chosen the path of terrorism. And therefore, whilst that economic failure is possibly very imminent, it's not something that Israel can really afford, either strategically or tactically, to really get involved with.
Lieutenant Colonel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.